a bloke died last night, and that, in and of itself, is not news. But not everyone is born equal, and some of us, when we die, the world cries. They won't even notice when I die. They'll just have to sort of ferry me out of this shed somehow, drop a grenade in it and blow the thing up. But this bloke was famous, so he mattered, and he was a satirist, a very famous satirist, and I had never heard of him. And even though I saw his name this morning on the BBC website, news service, I've already forgotten his name because it was unusual. He had a strange name. I'm not going to remember strange names. In this shed, we want blokes called Bob and girls like with names like Mary. But he's a famous satirist, and he got me thinking. Because I liked the cut of his jib. The sound of him. Reason being, he seems to have been one of those people, and I like to be one of those people too. Although I do it with less talent. He seems to have been one of those blokes who, those satirists, who have a crack at absolutely everybody. Now, he was a political satirist, whatever his name was. He was 94, and he was born in 1927, and I know this because he was 94. I just worked it out. He was a political satirist, and so in having a crack at everybody in America, because he's an American, that means having a crack at, well, there's only two types of people in America. Liberals, as they call them. They have a different definition of the word liberal than we do, but liberals, by which they mean sort of progressive, loony lefties, and conservatives, by which they mean kind of conservative, loony righties. Okay, now this guy, this satirist, he used to have a crack at all sides of the debate in America, which is pretty much just those two. There's three types of people in America. There's what they call liberals, there are conservatives, and there are some people who hate both those mobs. But we don't hear much from them. Now, because liberals and conservatives in America, they're both liberal Democrats. So surely there's some people that don't like either of those sorts of people in America. Surely, there must be some commies in America who don't like Democrats or Republicans. There must be greenies in America, surely, who don't like Democrats or what's the other mob? Republicans. There must be. Oh, well, may you say that, the Democrats are commies. But that argument is foiled by the fact that they're not. Otherwise, perfect. There was a Democrat who came out during the last election, and he's rich, and he's living the American dream. And Donald Trump had been saying, those Democrats, they're all a bunch of commies, And he said, you mean me? I'm the very essence of the American dream. I'm not a commie. I love all my money, and it's all mine. Most Democrats are like that too. Surely, commies must be a completely different sort of mob over there. Surely, because all the beautiful Democrats, all those Hollywood celebrities and everything, they're rich. Oh, maybe they're corrupt commies. All right. Now, anyway, this satirist used to have a crack at all sides of the debate. Now, I like that because I like to do that. But I like to do it with less talent. And that's why I'm in a shed and he's dead. No, that's why he's famous and I'm not. You know? And I'd rather be healthy in my shed than him right now. But that's beside the point because we're talking about him and not me. So good on him. Anyway, now there's a dilemma in being a political satirist, and a proper one and a professional one and a good one, in as much as if you are a good satirist, you're going to have a go at everyone. Or if you're what? No, you could be a Republican voting satirist who confines all his satirical wit to having a crack at Joe Biden, I suppose, and vice versa. So, all right. What would we call that then? A satirist who has a crack, who's happy to have a crack at both sides. I like that sort of guy. Whatever you'd call that guy, a virtuous satirist. I like virtuous satirists because they kind of keep the bastards honest. A little bit like Don Chip, who was from the Australian Democrats, and the raison d'etre in my Aussie accent of the Australian Democrats was not to be anything like the American Democrats, for God's sake. The Australian Democrats, their job was to keep the bastards honest, and by that they meant the Liberals, which is pretty much our Conservative Party, and the Nationals, which is another one of our Conservative parties, even more conservative, and the and Labor, which is kind of our lefties, but they're lefty, and our Labor is lefty in a very different way than American Democrats are lefties. And the reason, well, there's a logic to that, because like blue collar workers in Australia tend to vote left, and as far as I can tell, although I follow US politics a lot less than I follow Australian politics, blue collar workers, at least in the last few elections, seem to have been voting Conservative. That's possible. Our lefties are kind of Labor left, workers' rights. And whereas I think Democrats are more into progressive leftism than, and of course, they're, everyone's a bit of everything. But for example, if as the Americans would report it, a white cop shoots a black bloke, I think your average Democrat, if he's in America, is going to be in favour of sacking that cop as fast as possible, whereas a lefty in Australia will, because lefties in Australia, the Labor sort of lefties, they're going to say that worker has rights. Who's the worker? The cop. So you can't just sack him. You have to investigate it first. And obviously, corruption can creep into the investigation, or it can come in like a tsunami too. But the point is, in principle, the cop has rights. And so did the black guy, but it's, he can't go to court anymore. No, you know what I'm getting at, though, So, who was I talking about? Oh, that satirist who died. The bloke who died who mattered. Because he didn't live in a shed. And it's a bit tricky, I reckon, being a satirist myself, but one without talent. I'm very dedicated to being a satirist without talent. I put a lot of work into that. But it's tricky being a satirist and a comedic satirist too, because so many people have opinions and care so much about one side of a debate or another. If you have a crack at one side of the political debate, now this is a Captain Obvious comment about to come, you already know what it is, or if you have, look, if you're in a room full of Donald Trump lovers and you crack a joke about Donald Trump, they're going to say, they're going to think you're making a point when you're not. You're just having a crack. You saw a gag there, and it came at you like a googly, and you hit it for 6. That's all. And then you might be in a room full of loony lefties, and you have a crack at Joe Biden. Or you make us, you say what a funny guy Donald Trump is. He's very funny, and you might take him off, even something like one of the worst things he did. I think that disabled guy when he sort of, and pretended to be disabled when he was talking about this guy. He probably had cerebral palsy, or something. I don't know what he had. But the point is, if you did that, people will say that's not funny. But if you did it just right, it would be. But in that tough crowd, it's not funny. But it is. And the proof in the pudding that these things can be funny, even if they're not, is that this guy who died last night got a write-up on BBC News, and he had a crack at everybody. I read that he had a crack at even JFK. After JFK got shot, I think he was having a crack at what everyone was saying, because maybe people went overboard. I can't remember. I was born in the same year that JFK died. But I think, look, that's what I read anyway, that he was having a crack at the kind of irrational way that everyone was responding to the assassination, and probably the conspiracy theories and all that sort of stuff. So he's having a crack at that. So he reminds me, I can only imagine he's the sort of bloke who, if he hadn't died last night and he was looking at the COVID situation at the moment, look, he might have a crack at anti-vaxxers and have a crack at vaxxers as well. And is that wrong? Well, if you're on one side of a debate, yes, it is wrong. So should we, like if you're an anti-vaxxer, are they the good guys or the bad guys? They're the bad guys. But, there's a public health issue in attacking vaxxers. Sorry, anti-vaxxers. Well, did I get that around the wrong way? It doesn't really matter. You know what I'm talking about. So, these people who are happy to have a crack at it, people on all sides of the debate, should they be got rid of? Well, yes, because God said so, because he just got rid of this guy. But no, they shouldn't be. We need probably the bulk of people to be in on the debate and getting quite grumpy on Twitter and all that sort of stuff. But we need a few people off to the side keeping the bastards honest. So, you could have vaxxers attacking anti-vaxxers on Twitter. Now, what Twitter actually needs... I've got to go. You know what I'm talking about. Twitter... Someone's coming. I've got to go. What Twitter needs is someone in the middle. Just a second. I'll be 1 second. we need one person in the middle keeping the bastards honest. That's my son. You can imagine someone on Twitter, someone who had a role of criticising the arguing techniques of the vaxxers and the anti-vaxxers, pulling each side up, pulling them up when they go too far. You can imagine that. I don't think there's anyone who's got that role on Twitter, but you could do with a few people like that, saying, hey, you yelling at that guy, you, the anti-vaxxer, yelling at that guy, what you just said there, there's no evidence for that. And you, the vaxxer, arguing, yelling at that guy over there, what you just said, there's no evidence for that either. So you're both naughty. You need someone like that in Twitter land. But the trouble is, I don't think you can have such a person in Twitter land because both those guys will attack this guy. So we're not on Twitter. But in more sensible political spheres, like American politics, you had this guy sitting in the middle by the sound of it, having a crack at both guys, keeping the bastards honest. And you also, a little bit like we used to have Don Chip with the Australian Democrats, keeping the bastards honest. And he used to have a crack at the Liberals, and he used to have a crack at Labor, because his objective was to keep the bastards honest. Now, when he was having a crack at the Libs, the Liberals, which is our sort of conservative side of politics, he wasn't being a fascist. He was keeping the bastards honest. And when he was having a crack at Labor, he wasn't being anti-workers' rights. He was just keeping those bastards honest too. And possibly we need all sorts in this world. We need political people. We need activists. We need Gina Rineharts and Kerry Packers, captains of industry, billionaire types. Who else is going to run mining in Australia except a multi-billionaire? You wouldn't want the government running mining in Australia. They'd be hopelessly inefficient, surely. You need a couple of billionaires, possibly, arguably. Otherwise, if the public service ran it, it'd be hopelessly inefficient, and we'd all be poor. So you get a billionaire. You need all sorts in this world. You need some people, for example, I was chatting to my cousin about this, as Kerry Packer said, you need some people setting the rules, people in government. You need politicians. If you're going to sack them all, what are you going to get in return, in their place? More who are probably going to be worse. So stick with what you've got, probably. But anyway, you need all sorts in the world. You need governments setting the rules. And then you need kind of ambitious, money-making kind of people, presumably, making as much money as they can within those rules that the people in the government created. And you always need people keeping all the bastards honest, probably. And that includes people like satirists and activists and all sorts of people, making sure the government is being virtuous and noble and honourable as they make the rules, because some of them are rich too, and they're in both camps, which is a bit annoying. And you need some bastards keeping those guys honest too, the people making a lot of money, the billionaires. You probably need to keep their taxes low, actually, those guys over there, because if you're not going to keep their taxes low, you might as well give it to the government anyway. The reason for that is, arguably, is someone like Gina Rinehart. You can't tax the crap out of her because she might not be able to do as much mining business might she might not be able to employ as many people in the final analysis, and you could tax her $1 billion but lose $2 billion in taxes because she's employing less people, and all those people pay tax, that sort of thing, and you sell them the stuff that she mines anyway. Economics, it's very complicated. I think the good thing about economics is we can all argue about that till the cows come home, but none of us understand it. So the argument, the beat goes on. The argument can keep going on forever and ever, because so few of us understand economics. We can just say bullshit to each other. You're wrong, when none of us actually know anything really about economics. Most of us anyway. Anyway, look, I don't know what this episode's been about, but it's probably been about we need all sorts. We need people in the debates, but we need a few people standing back, keeping the bastards honest, is what I think. And even on very sensitive matters like racism, the environment, and all that sort of stuff, still, even on something as politically hot as Black Lives Matter and everything, you still need some satirists sitting back, having a crack at the pro-BLM people. BLM means Black Lives Matter. The pro-BLM people, some people sitting back and having a genuine, really red-hot crack at the pro-BLM people. And some people having a real red-hot crack at the other mob, the anti-BLM fascists, racists. I don't like them. And even on the environment, like if the Greenies, you need someone sitting back having a crack at those guys, having a really good, cracking jokes about some of their claims. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't want everybody doing that. You need just a select few, sitting back, having a satirical swipe at Greenies. Even though the cause of the Greenies is probably a wonderful cause. I think the planet's in a lot of trouble. So I support anybody who is going to be an activist against climate change and all that sort of stuff. However, if they go too far and say something stupid, I'll have a crack at them, and it's not because I'm an enemy of the Greenies. Same goes for the other side. People who might want to keep jobs going in Australia and all that sort of thing, and not agree to too much in what have we got next? The Glasgow Accord. That's what Scott Morrison's going over there to do now, is to go over to Glasgow and promise next to nothing. Australia will be a complete embarrassment, everyone's saying, because we're not doing anything on climate change. But I think people always say, Australia is an embarrassment on the world stage. But as I look up and down the street, it doesn't seem to affect people. They still go out and have coffees, al fresco, have nice lattes, and they're all smiling and cheerful and all that. So they don't seem that affected. Anyway. But the point is, I think Myers-Briggs style, it's not bad to have a few people sitting off, keeping the bastards honest and having a crack at absolutely everybody, where those people step out of line in the claims they make. So even if someone's cause is wonderful, you need someone sitting back and having a crack at that person if they make some claim that's got no basis in evidence or anything like that, even if their cause is good. So the obvious one that I keep thinking of is George Floyd. Okay, you need, if someone, Black Lives Matter and all that sort of stuff, and George Floyd was all planned and he was murdered. You'd say, I'm going to, look, that's probably a bad example, but you know what I mean. Everyone deserves to be held accountable, including the satirists themselves. This guy who died last night, he actually got held accountable too. because he probably went too far. When he was cracking jokes after JFK's funeral, they said, when after JFK got assassinated, he was cracking jokes about the way everyone was responding to JFK's death. You know, he was saying, "You're all a pack of lunatics the way you're responding to this," you know, and that wasn't very politically a good thing to do at the time, in America. But then, so he was cast out into the wilderness, for being insensitive, I think it was. But then Watergate came along. I read about that. I don't even know this guy, you know, but I read about him. And Watergate came along, and he started having a crack at Nixon, and he was back in vogue again. But that's not because he got kicked out of Vogue for going against a Republican, and then came back in the fold because he had a go at a Republican, you know, JFK and Nixon, because he did continue to have a crack at JFK even afterwards. I read about that, and quite clearly, you know, he would have a crack at Clinton just as quickly as he would have a crack at George W. Bush. And he would have a crack at Joe Biden just as surely and easily as he would have a crack at Donald Trump, no doubt about it. And is that wrong to criticize Donald Trump? Well, in some circles, yes. But you don't go out with those sorts of people for dinner, because they're boring sticks in the mud if you're a satirist. And the same goes for all those Joe Biden supporters, you know, who won't hear a bad thing against Joe Biden or a good thing said about Donald Trump. You know, for example, Donald Trump's quite funny, I find. If you just take away the morality of some of the that sits behind some of the jokes, his jokes tend to be funny. He's actually a very good communicator. He's quite funny. No, he's not funny. Now, when people say he's not funny, he actually is, you know, but in a way you don't like. But he's still technically funny, you know, if you list what constitutes funniness. He does tick some of those boxes. He is funny. No, he's not funny, because he has a go at disabled people, you know, stuff like LGBT people and stuff. So he's not funny. Well, he is. He's bad and funny, you know, arguably. You need someone sitting back saying stuff like that. You know? But I would never sit back and say stuff like that, because I could lose my job. Even though I'm sitting in a shed, someone could come across this and say, "Oh, he said it's funny to have a go at disabled people." That's a bad person, but not necessarily. I could be like that guy who died last night, a little bit, except without the talent, you know? Keeping the bastards honest. You need those people.